everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. This is the first time that I'm filming a sit-down video like this in at least a couple of months. I've definitely been more so in the mood to film reading vlogs, and I've had a really fun time making those kinds of videos for you guys, but I thought it was well past time to film some more of like my regular content. So today I want to talk about 10 books plus maybe one honorable mention. 10 books that I have read within the last year or so that I feel you all need to read before the end of the year, before 2025. I have done this kind of video for the past couple of years, and I have had such a fun time curating this list for you guys. This is 10 books that I would recommend to pretty much anyone, especially if you, of course, enjoy romance like I do. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into this list. So the first book or series that I want to bring up is the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. And if you don't know, Ilona Andrews is a husband and wife writing duo, and I have truly adored my experience both rereading the first few books of the series and then finally reading the last few books of this series. So first of all, Ilona Andrews is vastly underrated in my opinion. I feel that their writing is just so smart, so interesting. The world that they have created in this Hidden Legacy series is just so fascinating to read about. Plus, we have just fantastic characters and romances that we are following throughout this series. At its core, this is an urban fantasy romance series. This takes place in Houston. You could think of this as a parallel universe where there was this substance that was created in the 1800s known as the Osiris serum, and when people injected it into themselves, people started getting supernatural and magical abilities. And so as the generations have gone on, we are now in what I believe is present day Houston, and we see that there are now these houses of magical families, and each house essentially represents a different magical ability. And so the first 3 books we are following Nevada, our main character, and then in the last 3 books of the series we are following Catalina, pictured here. And the reason why I'm holding up, this is actually book 4, the reason why I'm holding this up is because I feel that the covers for the last 3 books are just absolutely stunning, and I just couldn't resist holding up my copy of Sapphire Flames. But yes, so this series essentially follows 2 romances where we have Nevada, like I said, and then Catalina is her younger sister. The characters are just so fantastic. They're all just so smart and competent, and you don't always get that, especially in fantasy or urban fantasy. A lot of the time, the characters are making really stupid decisions and it gets them in trouble, but that's not the case with this series. And I just love the world. The magic system is so cool, definitely has a unique feel to it, and these books are just so well paced, a lot of action, and of course really great romances at its core. So yes, I cannot recommend this highly enough. I feel like so many people have been putting off picking up this series, and please take this as your sign to start with book 1, which is Burn for me. Next up, I want to recommend like the most fun superhero villain romance ever. This is Not All Himbos Wear Capes by C. Rochelle. This is an MM romance where we have Butch, who is a superhero, and Xander, who is a villain. And on the one side, when they are in their hero-villain personas, we see that Butch is like ruining Xander's life, essentially. Xander is just trying to live his life, do a lot of like marine biology type research, but because he's a part of this villain family, Butch is just super suspicious of him, so he just keeps ruining his plans. And then on the other hand, when these 2 characters are not their superhero villain personas, when they are just themselves, they match up on this dating app, and it is just like the cutest and sweetest romance, but also incredibly funny. I definitely found myself chuckling out loud at times. This is also just super addictive. I did not want to put this book down. The audiobook narration is top tier. Would definitely recommend going the audiobook route. And yeah, just like so fun, definitely pretty kinky. and sexy as well. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. I've also read book 2 of this series, really enjoyed that one as well. And I know that there's a couple of other books out in this series as well, so I'm excited to get to those soon. So next up, I wanted to recommend a memoir in this video, and that would be The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This is a memoir that came out last October, I believe, and I read it like right when it came out, and I just loved it so much. I am someone who has been a huge fan of Britney Spears since the beginning, since she was 16, her first album. I remember being in like 3rd or 4th grade and listening to her music even back then, and it was just really wonderful to get to read her story from her perspective. I feel like over the course of her career, she's never been able to be this vulnerable with us, with society, with the media, because she's always been under a microscope. She's always been ridiculed for pretty much everything and anything that she does. We also have the whole conservatorship playing a part in that, and it was just really wonderful to really get that perspective from her of her career, her personal life, the conservatorship, her talking about her children, past relationships, things like that. And this book isn't all that long. It was about, I would say, 225 pages, something like that. I flew through this because I listened to the audiobook, which was beautifully narrated by Michelle Williams. Would highly recommend going the audiobook route. And I just thought this was fantastic. Truly one of the best memoirs that I have ever read. Next up, I want to recommend a fantasy romance trilogy that truly took over my life when I read this towards the beginning of the year, and that would be Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. So when I went into this series, I knew that a lot of people really loved books 2 and 3, but I hadn't really seen any rave reviews of this first book. So I went into this with kind of low expectations, and boy, did this first book alone knock me on my ass. Oh my God. This first book and the series as a whole is just truly amazing, truly next level when it comes to fantasy romance. Oh my God. So to give you a brief synopsis, if you don't know about this series, we have Tisana. She is a slave at the beginning of this first book, and her magic manifests during a confrontation with her owner, and so she is able to run away from that situation. She finds herself in another country where there is this organization known as the Orders, which is this organization of magic wielders, and she is hoping to get their help to help her people back home, to help the people that have been enslaved along with her. And so to earn her place in the Orders, she is placed with a mentor who is Max, who is our hero of the story. And so I love how this romance between Tisana and Max starts out as this reluctant mentor-mentee relationship. It turns into literally one of the most stunning friends to lovers romances I have ever read. And even though these two characters fall for each other in book 1, Carissa Broadbent, I feel, did an amazing job of keeping their romance interesting and just beautiful and addictive throughout the other 2 books of the series. I truly could not get enough of the scenes where it was just our 2 main characters on page alone together, just everything. I am obsessed with Max and Tisana. They are my babies, and there are some truly amazing things going on in the fantasy plot. This series to me has a very unique vibe to it. There is this sentient magic going on that's kind of a villain, and I mean there's a lot going on with that alone, but there's also a war going on. I mean, this is the War of Lost Hearts trilogy, and it's just beautifully written. I could go on about this series. I have gone on about this series quite a bit throughout this year because I mean, I just can't emphasize enough how much this blew me away, and I'm pretty sure the last couple of books broke my brain a bit because of the direction the fantasy plot went in. Just so cool, so unique, and yeah, just a fantastic series. Next up, for something quite a bit different, I wanted to go with a YA historical fiction book that I read towards the end of last year. And oh man, this is truly one of the best historical fiction books I've ever read by an author that I have very quickly become obsessed with, and that is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. This is my 2nd book that I have read by this author. Certainly won't be my last. I adore her writing first and foremost, and I also love how she gives a voice to parts of our world history that just aren't talked about at all. So this book is a World War II historical fiction. So this book essentially covers two main parts of World War history that I feel are definitely not talked about nearly enough. One of them being the refugee crisis, when the conflict between Nazi Germany and Russia was ramping up. There were thousands upon thousands of people and families that were forced out of their home, searching for a better life. And so these people end up going on the Gustav. And so the Gustav was intended to transport only about 1,800 passengers. That was the capacity of the ship, but there ended up being like over 10,000 people on this ship. And I believe it was supposed to go to Denmark, if I'm not mistaken. And so this tells the tragedy of how this ship unfortunately sank. I think it was struck by a U-boat. We're following 4 different POVs. We're following 4 different teenagers. And I really loved how each and every character just added so much to the story. And this book is told in like really short chapters, so you just can't help but keep reading. And obviously this is a very devastating book to read, but it was also just so beautifully written. And I loved the ending. I do remember like the ending of this was amazing. Truly a must read for like anybody. Even if you're someone that doesn't think they enjoy historical fiction, I would highly recommend picking up this book anyway. It is just that amazing. So next up is a book that I actually just read a couple of days ago, but I loved it so much. And I truly feel that so many more people need to pick this book up. That is Tangled Wires by Lillian Lark. This is a science fiction romance that truly gives me like Twilight Zone and Black Mirror vibes. This has a very unique feel to it. We are following Charlotte and Matthew. What we find out towards the beginning of the book, they're both working for this biomedical company. Matthew is the CEO, and Charlotte is the daughter of the man who founded this company, and he has since passed away. But before he passed away, he created Matthew. So Matthew is our hero. He is also an android, but nobody except Charlotte knows that Matthew is an android. Basically, her father passed Matthew off as Charlotte's brother and as a human for all of these years. And so basically because of that, Charlotte and Matthew have had a very tension-filled and angsty relationship from the time that he was created. And so Charlotte's father has passed away probably a few years before this book starts. And now Matthew, our android hero, he wants nothing more than to at least be friends with her. But Charlotte doesn't know how to relate to him. You know, he is an android. She doesn't know, like, can he really feel emotions? Like, how normal is he compared to a human? And meanwhile, we see pretty early on that Matthew has been absolutely obsessed and in love with her since his creation. And so what ensues is just so much angst. This is also a very emotional book. I do want to point out content warning for depression and suicide. There's just so much tension between these two characters. You could cut it with a knife. And also Matthew gives me slight like Cinedom vibes. Like, he can be incredibly sweet and caring towards Charlotte, but when they get together, finally, because there is quite the build up to that, when they do finally get together, we see that he definitely has a more demanding side to him, and that's really fun. And I loved this book and these characters so much that I actually read the bonus story that Lillian Lark wrote for them. I think it's called A Tangled Christmas, and it's about their first Christmas together, and that was also just incredibly sweet and sexy. Next up, I have 2 books that I read really recently. I actually read both of these books in my last reading vlog, so I'll link that vlog up at the cards above. So I have Not Another Love Song and Happy Place. Let's talk about Happy Place first by Emily Henry. So I have an interesting journey with Emily Henry. I read Beach Read when it came out. I think this was in 2020, and I actually didn't love it. I gave it like 3 stars, and so since then I've been putting off picking up any of her other books. However, I have heard so many of my bookish friends as well as authors whose opinions I really trust just rave and rave about this book in particular. So this is about our two main characters. We have Harriet and Gwen, and then we have their four best friends here. And so every year they take this vacation to this cottage in Maine that one of their friends' families owns. And so this book time jumps quite a bit between when all these characters were in college and they all became best friends, and then present day when they are making their last annual trip to this Maine cottage because one of the characters, I believe this was Sabrina's father, has now sold the cottage. So this will be their last year taking this particular vacation. So this book at its core is truly a love letter to people in like their late 20s into their 30s and beyond who have best friends and are trying to keep those friendships alive and healthy. And that's just not easy to do when it's not nearly as convenient for you to get together with your friends. I know I related to this book so much because I'm now 31 and two of my best friends in the whole wide world, we became friends our freshman year of college. And now we have to put so much more effort to get together. One of my best friends in particular now lives in New York, so I only really see her face to face when I take trips up there. And so it's hard, right? And I just loved how Emily Henry talked about that topic in this book. And there's also this really angsty and beautiful second chance romance between Harriet and Wynne that I really loved. The writing in this was just absolutely stunning. I definitely got emotional towards the end of this book. Like, just an amazing story, an amazing book. And now I am very happy to tell you guys that I am an Emily Henry fan now, and I'm very excited to pick up more of her books in the future. Next up, for the other book that I read recently that I have to talk about, is Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. Oh my God, you guys! This book is fucking fantastic. Oh my God. First of all, if you are someone who is really into music, especially classical music, you will really connect to this story. This centers around Xander and Gwen. They both are a part of this orchestra together, though Xander is a celebrity in his own right. He is a part of this like classical rock band. Like, they play string instruments, but they play covers of rock songs essentially. But he is also a part of this orchestra. And so the two of them actually meet when Gwen is playing a gig at a wedding, and he lends his cello to her, though she's a violinist, but she can kind of fumble her way through playing the cello. But oh my God, the chemistry between these two is instant. I loved how Xander definitely has a grumpy, kind of broody feel to him, and he comes off as kind of an asshole to Gwen at the beginning, so she kind of hates him at first. And oh my God, this was just perfect. Like, the first half had me like giggling and kicking my feet because of the bickering and the bantering between these two. And then in the second half, I was just like swooning so hard for this romance. You just can't help but feel this connection between Gwen and Xander. And I just love how these two develop throughout the book, not only their relationship, but as individuals. And I loved the New York setting. And I feel like I'm not articulating very well what is so incredible about this book, but please give it a chance. Even if you're someone that isn't all that much into music or classical music, anything like that, I still think that that passion comes off the page. You can tell that Julie Soto has experience in classical music and she really has an appreciation for it. And yeah, like, this romance, this couple is like in my top 3 couples that I've read so far this year. Next up, I have to recommend Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I also remember recommending yours truly in last year's video that I did on this topic of 10 books you need to read before the end of the year, because Abby Jimenez, to me, man, she has been knocking it out of the park with her contemporary romances. I actually did try reading her debut, which was The Friend Zone, and I DNF'd that. But her recent releases, man, are just top tier. Her heroes in particular are just absolutely perfect, and I'm obsessed. This starts out as a fake dating romance, and while it does have a summary-ish vibe to it. I mean, the title is definitely accurate. I would say that this is a book that you could definitely read at any time of the year. And so yes, what starts out at fake dating quickly turns into something more meaningful. And I also adored this book so much because I related to Emma so much, like it's almost scary, mainly because she has what is known as avoidant attachment style. Attachment styles are different styles of how you attach to other people. And so I'll briefly explain what avoidant attachment style is, as Abby Jimenez explains it. She says, avoidance relationships tend to be superficial and fleeting because that's what they're comfortable with. It stems from childhood trauma, usually relating to an emotionally unavailable caretaker or unstable upbringing. They avoid emotional bonds and romantic relationships. They don't seek support from those around them, and they withdraw when someone tries to get to know them, which was honestly really difficult to write in a character as an author trying to tell a love story. Yeah, I definitely have that as well. So I kind of felt called out by this book, but I also felt seen, and I loved how both of our main characters are going through so much. There's a lot of family issues that both of them are going through, and like it just made this book that much more meaningful. So last but certainly not least, I have to bring up Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. So last year I brought up Real by Kennedy Ryan for my 10 books to read before the end of the year. And so it seems fitting that I'm bringing up another Kennedy Ryan book for this year's video. I would also highly recommend book 2 of this series, which is This Could Be Us. I think I actually enjoyed that book a little bit more, but you definitely should start out with this first book, and I adored this book as well. So this book at its core is a second chance romance between Josiah and Yasmin. They were married for years, they had a couple of children together, and they ended up getting divorced mainly because of a tragedy that happens in their family. I do want to point out content warning for, I believe it was miscarriage. And so this book is incredibly emotional. I would say that this book is almost more of a fiction novel with a romance, because while the romance is important to the story, there's also so much more going on in the story with Yasmin and Josiah's family, like with their children, things like that, that I would say, you know, it definitely teeters on the fence between romance and fiction. But regardless, this is just an incredible story, an incredible second chance romance. And then book 2, like I said, This Could Be Us. This is Soledad's story. Soledad is Yasmin's best friend, one of her best friends, and her romance is just equally stunning. Like I said, I almost enjoyed that one a little bit more than this one, but like this was also just a beautiful story. I have said this once, I've probably said this a few times, and I'll say it again. I feel like no one is writing romance quite like Kennedy Ryan. She is truly on another level. That is technically it for this video, but I did want to mention one honorable mention. So that is going to be Hero by Claire Kent. I have talked about this series, I think now in 2 past videos like this, where I'm recommending 10 books you need to read before the end of the year. So that's why it's an honorable mention. I feel like I've talked about this book and this series enough in these kinds of videos, but I still feel like not nearly enough people have picked up this series. This is the Kindled series by Claire Kent. This is an apocalypse romance series. And at the very beginning of book 1, which is Haven, there's also Last Light, which is, I guess, technically a prequel to the series, but you could start with either Haven or Last Light. But anyways, what we see at the beginning of the first book is that a meteor has hit Earth, and of course that completely messes up the ecosystem. And this is about Zed and Esther specifically, and how they end up being like the last people in their family after a couple of years of, you know, trying to survive after this meteor has hit the Earth. Zed is actually Esther's former stepdad's younger brother, and he had a daughter with his girlfriend who ended up passing away a couple of years in the past. And so now it's just the 3 of them trying to survive with each other, and Esther and Zed's romance is incredibly tension-filled, so beautiful. This book had me, a sobbing mess. Claire Kent is another author that I just feel like no one is writing romance quite like her, and it's amazing. And pretty sure this is my favorite book of the series so far, even though I have truly loved each and every book that I have read so far. And there's like, I think 3 more books left in the series, and I'm definitely savoring them because I do not want this series to be over. So yes, that is truly the end of this video of 10 plus books that I feel you absolutely need to read before the end of the year. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me some books that you think I or other viewers should read before the end of the year, or just let me know if you've done a video like this before if you're also a booktuber. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!